Good morning. Good morning. Let me go check my stream. Do a little refresh there. We are good. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday. It's going to be a nice long day with Mayor Jim. And thank you for joining me for coffee. We got a 30-minute head start here. And, I'm going to do something a little different this morning to get you guys started. I had one of my followers, Donald Best, send me a song yesterday from Johnny Depp that I didn't hear before. And quite frankly, it's an excellent song. So I'm going to go ahead and take the risk of demonetization by playing it. But I think it's worth it. So let me go ahead and get that started, because the lyrics, I think, are quite applicable to today and this entire inquiry about trust in humans and where we kind of go with this. But please enjoy. Of everybody who has a right to be jaded, I think it's him. You can hear the pain, you can hear his scars, and that's an amazing song. Can't believe humans anymore. That's quite the message, especially when we're watching an inquiry that's full of hearsay, speculation, and just straight up lying. All based on an event that we had to witness that was heartbreaking. So I thought it was a kind of appropriate to go ahead and listen to that song. It resonated with me yesterday, and I thought I would share with you. We're looking good for the stream today, so hopefully no hiccups at all today. And I'm excited to bring all of this to you. I'm going to introduce myself a bit. I haven't done that yet, where I got to show you who I am and share a little bit about me. And now that I just learned the lesson, I can't share audio that way. I got to share it a different way. I'm going to share my little cheesy video that I made to introduce myself to the world, because I am running for office and I wanted to, sorry, find it. There it is. Wanted to get the message out, share a bit about who I am, what I'm about, and I'm actually hanging out in the shed. I'm in the trailer today, which is sitting back here. But yeah, we're in the bush, off grid, doing that whole thing. And I thought I would share a little bit about me with you, so you know who you're watching today. Hello, Yellowhead. I am Jason Lavigne, and I'm running as an independent candidate for our next federal election. And I would like to introduce myself. I now live near Breton, where my wife and I are building our new homestead and schooling our 2 young boys. I am worried that my boys will not grow up in the same Canada that I did. The times are changing, and lately, not always for the better. Before moving back home to the prairies, I was a serial entrepreneur in the Greater Toronto area, learning the law, building businesses, and developing award-winning technology. I would like to take these skills and do my part to help my neighbors, so I'm starting a long road to Ottawa. I'm Jason Lavigne. I'm the CEO and Chief Nursing. Specifically, it's very strong and engaging, and it's exploding. So the talent here is exploding. It's fantastic to see.
Please welcome Sadia Muzaffar, President and COO, and Jason Lavigne, Founder and CEO of Black and White Logic, to accept this award.
Thank you to Jason and to Rachel and to
Any device, anywhere, anytime. That's the fantastic part of the cloud.
Jason Lavigne's Connect to Fans, an internet startup he co-founded, is a great example of a new cloud-based business.
Yellowhead, the last several years we've all been working hard together to get through the tough times. Our federal government has not been doing a great job of listening to us. I am fighting for our farmers, our truckers, the silent majority, the fed up, and all of my marginalized neighbors. I am calling for new protections and reclaiming of rights for all Canadians of all ages. We need independent provinces under a new unified agreement with Canada. And to further protect Canadians for generations to come, we need parliamentary, statute, and regulatory review, rollbacks, and reform. Come join me online at yellowhead.vote. Thank you, Yellowhead. There you are, Yellowhead. I'm running for office, and I believe all of those are still very valid. And here we are today taking a look at what the truckers had to go through. And the rights and charters, infringements and everything that we're here for today. And this is exactly why I'm running. The truckers inspired me to get behind Canada. I almost moved. We almost moved to the States due to the restrictions in Ontario. But we decided to give Canada. I didn't want to leave. I just didn't want to leave. So Alberta, we went. I grew up on the prairies in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. I went out east to work in Ontario. I'm a computer guy, so I'm that tech guy online that does that stuff. Did a bunch of stuff there. Got married, had a couple of children, and then when things went bad, we needed to leave. Ontario got too restrictive. It was being very difficult. So we were going to move to the States, but we stayed in Canada and moved to Alberta. That was over a year ago. And since then, the trucker convoy happened. I got inspired, and I really want to make sure that we have some independent oversight and we can absolutely hold the 44th Parliament accountable during the 45th Parliament. So let me see here. How much time we got? Oh, good. So we do have another video from, let me pull up my note. Yeah, Christine of the Canadian Constitution Foundation. She does excellent reviews. She does a very legal analysis of the proceedings of the hearings, and she did a great one for yesterday. So I'm going to share it with you all today, so we're up to speed on what we're looking for today. Keep in mind, this is not a court case. This is a hearing and an inquiry, so we're here for information. And let me get that video queued up for you. And thank you for the chats. You keep those going. If you have any questions about what we're seeing, what we're doing, go ahead and put it into the chat, and I will be glad to answer it. And here we go. I got the video. Enjoy. Well, I'm disappointed. We had some good testimony from the city of Ottawa yesterday. Slowly left. Yeah, no, he was not on board with the desire to be a lot more aggressive with the protesters. So slowly left and was replaced by Bell, who was not as concerned about how they respond aggressively. But anyways, if you were going through the chat and paying attention, this was a lot of embellishments, a lot of lying. I'm not impressed at all. The first two witnesses from the city, the chief of staff and the city manager, were far more honest. I didn't hear embellishments like this at all. This is not, I'm not happy. This shouldn't be happening with elected officials. I'm not sure why his story is changing or so much different than his staff. His staff is painting a picture of relative calm hanging on, but he's not painting that picture at all. More like, yeah, no, he's probably escorted out, because we heard half the council wasn't for his plan and the other half was for it. We even had split on the councillors on day two. They were, one was for, one was for against. But yeah, I think he was ushered out. He wasn't getting cooperation. They started to stop talking to him. His life was getting very difficult, and we're going to hear from him. He is a witness that is taking a stand. So, and from his representative, his lawyer, so far, the questions his lawyer has been asking of the witnesses, it's clear that ex-chief Slowly is not impressed with what's being said about him. And I'm going to make sure that my link is still there. Hopefully we're still live. I kind of lost my video over for the stream, so hopefully we'll get that back soon. Okay, and then slowly, yeah. He doesn't need a restroom break. He just took. Yeah, no, yeah, that's funny. Yeah, no, I'm not impressed. So I'm looking forward to the cross. The cross should really be enlightening. And let me make sure I can get my stream back. Okay, yeah, it looks like my stream is back. Good news. So I did have a Twitter user reach out to me, and I know you're on Rumble, so I'm going to go ahead and share the screen that I think is important. So one of the things that Jim said was cancer treatment. Cancer treatment was something that was blocked for children. You may not know this, but I do have a child with special needs. So Chio and I and my family, we go back a long ways. We are very thankful to Chio. Chio is a wonderful organization, and it's located in Ottawa. And there's no doubt in my mind that not a single person was stopped by going to Chio, which is the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. And just trying to say that that happened upsets me quite a bit personally, because that's a wonderful organization. And to even throw them under the bus by saying that anybody had to cancel any treatment at any time for chemo or otherwise is an insult to the hospital itself as well. That just never happened. Maybe people canceled appointments due to the propaganda they were hearing on the media. They were being told it was bad. But I guarantee you, there was no one that was denied service at any way, shape, or form if they were trying to get to the hospital. So I don't like stuff like that. That's incredible. And very quickly, Twitter responded to that. And here's a map. You can see all those red little dots everywhere. These are places for treatment, hospitals. And then this little X right here. That is where the protest was. And we've seen pictures and conversations and talking about how it was all around the core. It spread out a bit into the residential area. But there's no chance. There's no chance that any other hospitals were blocked in any way, shape, or form. It's disturbing, to say the least. Yes, what we got here? Yeah, no, I agree. I was expecting the staff to kind of basically have the same message as the entire city, but no, the staff seems to be far more honest. Maybe it's because they're not politicians, because Jim did mention we're a bunch of politicians, so maybe that's exactly why the staff was a little bit more honest. And you know, they don't have guaranteed jobs, so maybe they were just doing an honest interpretation of what they saw. Yeah, absolutely, Law. Yeah, I agree. We're in Alberta. There's a lot of that around here, and I'm sad to see that Ottawa has that as a mayor. Yeah, for sure. He lied many times. It's really hard to justify any of that. It was incredible to me to see it, and I'm disappointed. I truly am disappointed. I do like it when people are doing their best to tell the truth from their perspective, not trying to sugarcoat it, not trying to embellish it, and certainly not being delicate with the wording in order to have the proper terminology that they think they need to escalate it to an occupation and then up the chain into an illegal act. What's Wayne got to say here? Yeah, for sure. It just shows that they'll say anything to justify the story. And if you pay very close attention, Wayne and everybody else, the story also contradicts. If you pay close attention, they'll say one thing. For example, the city was falling apart. We had no resources. The police couldn't handle it. Our city police couldn't handle it. We had to bring people in from all over the country. And then he took a sip of water, had a breath, and then told it how everybody would look at Ottawa as an example and how well they did and exactly how they handle situations like this. That's, come on. Unless they plan on clipping it and only spitting out the positive parts on media, which is exactly what they'll do. We now also have the other parts that contradict it. We have the streams, we have the video, and I assure you, over the next little bit, a lot of people are going to be pulling out the pieces and putting it together. Certainly looking forward to the cross. Brendan Miller is going to do great. Let's go, Brendan, because he's there for the convoy, and we all know what was going on. The convoy was cooperating. They were always willing to cooperate. They were pushing for cooperation, and when they did get some cooperation, for example, the deal to move the trucks into the core and out of the residential, they were cooperating and executing on that deal. We heard testimony from the staff on that in detail, including some pictures. Yeah, James, we got to laugh at this. But I am a little frustrated, so apologies if I am showing that frustration. I do try not to, but this is bad. I don't understand how an elected official sitting in front of a camera, in front of the world, feels so safe and comfortable with the line. Maybe he's aware that nobody's going to do anything about it. But here we are. We're exposing him the best we can. We're watching it real time, and it's coming out. It's coming out. I think this is unraveling for Jim. And do keep in mind, after this is going to be officials and police So we may get off of this political narrative and get back onto the actual events on the ground and get more of the information. But it is sounding like there were certain levels, like the mayor's office, which were not cooperative at all, and the federal level as well. So the prime minister's office wasn't cooperative at all. Hence, yeah, no kidding. And also, they're talking about bombs and bikers and all this other stuff, which never happened. A permanent structure, which was only up for the event. I don't think they know what the definition of permanent means. And they were, I think they were really blowing this out of proportion, but they were doing that from the moment that resistance to the mandate started. So even before the first truck started its engine in the west or east, this narrative was already coming out. Talk to the city manager. Look, I really think people like Tom Marazzo and Tamara Lynch, they had the best intention to have the protest legal, peaceful, and do their best to kind of limit the impact to the innocent residents. They weren't being cooperated with. We've heard that testimony. We didn't even have to hear from the convoy side yet at all. We've heard the testimony from the staff that no, cooperation was not on the table. They weren't interested in it. The convoy had to produce a lot of goodwill even to get a meeting with the mayor. I don't think they ever got that meeting with the mayor. I haven't heard that testimony. Hopefully we'll find out. But from what I understand, they were in the middle of executing the agreement when the Emergency Act was invoked. So they didn't even have a chance to finish. Maybe, yeah, no, JT's got a lot of friends, right? Maybe, but they seem to be on the same page when it comes to their desire to not talk, be firm, and go ahead and escalate it, continue to escalate it, and then blame it on the protesters. At the same time, they're talking about the raves and the bouncy castles and the hot tubs, but they're trying to also say it was almost an insurrection. It was a moment away from a collapse. You can't have both narratives at the same time. It's really ridiculous. And I think Canadians are way too smart for that. Oh, yeah, no kidding. They keep bringing that up, man. No, in Canada, we have guns and stuff, but that certainly was not an issue. Down in Coots, there was, and believe it or not, people don't talk about this. The RCMP in Coots did not find the guns. The guns were turned in by the organizers who found out about the guns, and it never made it to the protest. So it's not like the RCMP were randomly checking all the trailers and found the guns. The guns were turned in by the people involved at Coots, because that's not what it was about and never was about that. And as we saw the result of that headline, that's what was trying to be avoided at all times. We can go down the road on who brought the guns, why they were there, etc. But the narrative was all that mattered for that one. And that's what shut down Coots right away. And unfortunately, that happened. But Canada should know that it was the Coots protesters who turned the guns into the RCMP. It wasn't the RCMP who found it. So found them. So after that point, it was just a national headline. All right, cool. So let me go ahead and queue up the screen. Make sure we don't miss a single moment of it. There we go. Excellent. We'll make it tiny. All right, so thanks for all the chat so far. It's been going quite well. I do have to apologize to a whole whack of you who were on here on YouTube at the beginning. That Johnny Depp song obviously triggered the AI on YouTube to drop my stream for a little bit there until I stopped playing the song. I kind of suspected there might be trouble, so now I've learned. I'll avoid all music at all times when it comes to that. Playing streams and other videos seems to be all right. It was just the music. Maybe it was just too good for the AI. They had to cut it off. So for those of you that were dropped and had to come back, apologize. Lesson learned. For those of you on Rumble, you didn't miss a beat. And I believe all the other platforms stayed up as well. So lesson learned. I guess I got YouTube's attention. And they also shadow banned me for about an hour. So you couldn't even search my stream. It wasn't available. You could only get to it from the direct link. So lesson learned. But now we're back on the search. So we should be all right now. Okay, cool. Stream's good. I'm making sure that number is moving, because if that freezes, then we lost the stream. And let me quickly check and see how we're doing on Twitter here. And remember, you can put your comments basically anywhere, and I'll get to them. Excellent. We do have, yeah, Don TJ90. You've got some of the best art, so I love your posters, and keep them coming. All right, so a couple more things that Jim said that I wasn't super pleased with. He was making it clear that he, or at least he's pretending like he didn't anticipate the length of it, the size of it, and how he kept saying it was in his lifetime and in generations, an event like this hasn't happened. Yeah, that's because the government traditionally doesn't overstep this bad. The protest was directly proportional to the overstep. So if it was a massive protest, that's because it was a massive overstep. And he also made the comment that this wasn't an issue with the city of Ottawa. Don't know why they were protesting here. Then he also said it was an issue with the province and the federal government. Well, if it's a federal government issue, where is he expecting us to protest? Does he want us to just go to a farmer's field and yell? That was a ridiculous statement. You're the nation's capital. You have the federal government staying there. You even bragged about that they're the largest taxpayer and the largest employer. So we can understand completely the special relationship the federal government has with Ottawa. So to make a statement like if there's a protest against the federal government, Ottawa's not the place for it, Jim, you know that's ridiculous. Canada knows that's ridiculous. And you're kind of just exposing your mindset, your authoritative mindset, that you think things should be done a certain way, even if it makes no sense. So where would you like the nation capital protesters to go when the nation has done something on the federal level that we need to protest? It's ridiculous, Jim. And then also to brag on how well you did, that was ridiculous as well. I'm hoping that we'll get a lot more honest testimony through the cross. I'm not sure if the committee council's complete yet. She suggested a break, but she may be continuing, and I'm not sure yet. Let's see what James has to say. Wasn't there a massive protest prior to Mulroney stepping down? There's protests all over Canada for several things. And if you really pay attention, Quebec does a lot of protesting, and First Nations rightfully does a lot of protesting. And sometimes their protesting is very disruptive to roads, rail, other things. So no, Canada is quite accustomed to having protests, dealing with them, and also having long protests. So his saying that it was like 2 days. Normally we have a protest and they take their placards and leave. That was incredibly rude, because you're being condescending to actual all protesters before. That's not how it does. You don't just show up, wave your placards and then leave. A protest is meant to accomplish something. And we've had month-long protests in Canada. And we typically, in the end, do resolve them. There's no active protest right now. So Canada has a history of addressing them. And I don't know of a single First Nations protest across Canada in history where there was no conversation allowed and they just went straight to an Emergency Act. Obviously, that didn't happen because the Emergency Act was only invoked twice, once by Trudeau Sr. for the Quebec incidents, and then now once Trudeau Jr. for the convoy. So I can tell you Canada does know how to protest, and the Canada government has a history of responding to protests in a better way than they did on this one. Hence why we have a 6-week inquiry, 65 witnesses, and a massive amount of effort to get to the bottom of this one. Because, Jim, unlike what you were trying to say, this protest was reasonable, it was proportional, and it still isn't resolved. It's why we're having this inquiry right now. So for him to make a statement like it's unprecedented, that's ridiculous. And last point on that, things can be unprecedented. That's kind of the point of the word. Sometimes things become the first time, and we're going to learn from, and going forward, this is how we're going to respond. So there's nothing wrong with things becoming unprecedented. The term gets thrown around like a negative thing. So just because it's unprecedented, we should ignore it and treat it different. That's a weird mindset to have. I think because it's unprecedented, we get to learn from it. We get to respond to it. And this is our time to either be fools about it or to shine. So I don't look at unprecedented things or record-breaking or first time ever as a negative or something to be avoided. Those are the times where we reached our limit, we've surpassed boundaries, and we're going to grow and learn. So I'm not a fan of that mindset that we hear a lot of from these officials around this, that we shouldn't be doing that. Okay, so they now are coming back. He is back on the stand. No more messages? All right. So, and I wonder how many of you think there might be protests again after this. So after this commission is complete, and if the recommendations come out along the lines where I'm thinking they might, which will be a little bit more restrictions on what would be considered peaceful protests. But do you think we'll have another one? So do you think after this, if Trudeau is still not taking movement, is not listening to people, pushing mandates, pushing the vaccine, etc., are we going to see another protest? We might, and it's basically going to be one of those if it needs to be. But let's find out what we get here. I would like to ask everybody to be patient for the next 6 weeks. Wait this out. There's the midterms in the U.S. should be quite distracting for a lot of people for a while as well. And once we get through that, we should at least have a lot more information to go through, and then we got to wait for the report. I have started to publish videos which are just my commentary. So if you look at my channel, you'll see that. All right, we're back. Thank you very much, and I'll be quiet. Well, there we go. That was a lot of fun. We heard a lot of testimony again from the mayor, and boy, did Brendan ever hit him good. Got him to admit that, yeah, sure enough, we the truckers actually had an agreement. They were doing it, and they didn't breach it. That's basically the most important part here, is that there was a plan in place. It was being used. So that means there was a way out. There's no reason to bring in the Emergency Act. He was... Yeah, I know. It's pretty weird how they don't... they're not very accountable. I'm pretty disappointed in how unaccountable these people are. I do have a special guest, though. Excuse me. Time to bleach you. Yeah, go ahead, Law. Take a break, but I actually have a guest. So who I have here is Anonymous. Reached out to me on Twitter. Identity is being kept. Hold on a second. If you can unmute yourself and join us, and you can go ahead and talk about what you want to talk about. What we were doing is in the chat, we were debating about vaccine mandates with the federal government. What kind were they? Who was not mandated? Who was mandated? And then I had someone reach out to me on Twitter and graciously agreed to come and chat with us. This person's concerned about identity, so we're going to keep it anonymous. And I will disclose to you, because it is anonymous, we will hear this out, but I'm very keen, and I do have a lot of respect for this person. So thank you for joining me today. And if you want to go ahead and just say hi, but don't tell us who you are, but go ahead and get into what we were talking about on Twitter.
Well, hi there, Jason. Thanks very, very much for having me on your stream. What you're doing is invaluable, and I really, really, really appreciate what you're doing here. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
My pleasure.
So as Jason introduced me, I am going to be remaining anonymous. The reason being is because I am or I guess was, a public servant. And I know a little bit about what went on. Now I need to be very, very, very careful with what I tell you guys today, but I just wanted to clear up some of the points that Jason was making on the chatting stream. And if you hear me pause or take deep breaths, I'm just consolidating my thoughts just in case. So
Thank you for that. And no problem. We're here for you.
So the MPs, they're in a different strata than your run-of-the-mill bureaucrat is. I ended up reading something, I believe it was an official government communication, that was saying that since the MPs are sort of considered essential, they can't go to the House of Commons if they're unjabbed, but they can do their jobs remotely, because it's unlawful to take them away from supporting their constituents. But for everybody else, regardless if they work from home or an office, they are required to have a vaccination under the Treasury Board mandate. So the link that Jason posted gave a little bit of a breakdown of who said what in their attestations. Now, the attestations were on an honor basis, and there was a portal that you could log into, and then you could say, like, I am jabbed, I am unjabbed, or I'm seeking an accommodation. So the people that said they were unjabbed or partially jabbed, because essentially the breakdown would be unjabbed, and then when you selected unjabbed, it was partially, you could select partially jabbed or like no jabs. If you selected any of those, come October 15th, you were immediately going on leave without pay.
Without pay, okay.
Yeah.
And that was 2001?
That's
sorry, 2021?
2021, yes, that's correct. That's correct. So that was a non-negotiable thing. However, if you turned around and said, hey, I'd like an accommodation, you could either select medical, or you could select religious or another valid human rights ground. And what would end up happening to you is that you would need to submit your accommodation request in a timely manner, and you would need to have it signed by, oh my
supporting
goodness.
Or something, like a doctor or somebody supporting it?
Yeah,
like
so a doctor, if you were doing medical, you would need to have it signed by a doctor, but I'm sure that all your viewers know how hard it is to get a medical accommodation in Canada. So you'd not only need to have a doctor sign it, but you would also need to have a, what do you call those people there that can give you signatures? A notary, thank you. Oh my goodness, brain fart.
No.
Post-lunch crash. So you need to have a testimony from a doctor, and then of course a notary. But if you were doing any other protected human rights grounds, you'd have to get just the notary and then submit it by the deadline, which was October 15th. And then what would end up happening is you would go into the Treasury Board system, and the Treasury Board had a bespoke council that would look at all of the accommodation requests and then yay or nay them. So you need to have a written request first and explain why you were requesting the accommodation, like how you could not be vaccinated. And then from there, the Treasury Board for each individual public servant would give a list of follow-up questions to your management, and then HR would attend and they'd go through all of these different types of questions with you. And this was a, I guess, a verbal / oral interview. Yeah, Lawrence, veiled threat. So these, from what I understand, these interviews were a vetting process, and they were meant to trap people, especially those people who were undergoing a religious accommodation, especially if you're part of any of the Abrahamic religions. Well, they would chuck into your face, your spiritual leaders have told you that it's okay to receive this vaccination, like how do you plea? So they were trying to invalidate people's personal religious testimony, and as you know, there are several pieces of case law that say that, you know, your religious beliefs, doesn't matter what banner you fall under, are personal and personal only, regardless of what a religious leader says your beliefs should be. It's your interpretation of the scripture, holy book, dogma, etc., etc. So they were trying to lambaste people for that. And then there was also the HR representative was supposedly there to be taking notes. So your oral interview, even if you requested it to be recorded, they wouldn't particularly pass off the recording to the Treasury Board. What would happen is the Treasury Board would get the minutes of what HR recorded, and some of these interviews were very long and very, very complicated, so like an hour plus of religious information. And of course, HR and management are hardly theologians. Yeah,
I think that's right.
It's just on the wrong syllable here. But anyhow, so when these things were passed off to the Treasury Board, sometimes they didn't reflect accurate information. And also sometimes management or HR would put their personal opinions into these things.
Right. Of course.
So there are people that ended up ATIPing. They ended up doing an ATIP, and it's if you're doing it on yourself, it's free, but if you're doing it for another person, well, I think it's like you pay $5 or something. And you can get the information back on the case of your choosing. So what ended up happening with a handful of people that I knew is they ended up doing some ATIP requests, and what they got back didn't reflect what their testimony was during their interview. So this is a big problem, and it shows in my opinion, a lack of transparency. And I have to say that I feel very, very strongly about a lack of transparency in government.
Yeah, no
Ask
kidding.
me
Yeah, you
about that
should.
later.
I'd love to.
But that is the general gist of what I can talk about.
So
the
the
only thing.
staff. Sorry, go ahead. My apologies.
Oh, no worries there, Jason. The only thing that I can recommend is that if somebody has been negatively affected by one of these policies and you're part of the government, is ATIP, 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 ATIP. It is within your right to do so. And if there is a problem, respectfully but firmly get in contact with your union, with management, and move forward with that. I know the opinion about unions is probably a very negative one, but there have been, from what I've heard in the pipeline, there have been reports of the union coming through for their members. You just have to keep an even keel and stick to the facts. And well, bring the ATIP forward. And usually what will end up happening is there is a redo of the decision. Sorry, I'm struggling for words here, you guys. There's essentially like a rehearing almost between you and the powers that be with your union as a mediator in the middle, from what I've heard anyway.
Wow. So there's two classes of federal employees. There's the elected class, and then there's the non-elected class. So clearly the non-elected class are the ones we're talking about here, the ones that had no choice. Well, let's talk like the government. Your choice was to work or not. So there's your choice. So I guess they had that choice. But that's not really a choice. That's duress. So the 773 who decided not to get vaccinated, do you believe all 773 were exempt through religious or another exemption?
No, because on your website there is a breakdown of people who got exemptions for religious, medical, or other protected human rights grounds. And it's that, I believe the figure is 41 people for other reasons. That's the most impressive one, because I have not the foggiest how they ended up getting away with that, but they pretty much pulled a rabbit out of the hat, in my opinion, from the horror stories that I've been hearing.
And law asks here, do you think anybody lied on their attestation?
Yes, there was probably people that ended up lying, but you were told by management not to say anything. Like for me personally, I was part of the people that clicked the unvaccinated.
Okay, well, you're being honest.
Because I didn't want to lie, because if you were caught, it was on the honor system first. So if you were caught lying, then that's immediate grounds for dismissal, because that's misconduct. So I immediately clicked unvaccinated because that's what I was, right? So that was a bing bang thank you. Well, come October 15th, then you're going to go on leave without pay. And I just recently got back this June. So
are you serious? So from October to June you were without pay?
Yep.
How did you handle that? Did EI kick in, or was that also denied?
No, EI was denied. Because
it was a personal choice that you were on leave?
Yeah, exactly. because it was a personal choice and I was on leave and
Right.
I was violating a policy of the organization.
Right.
But people who were denied their religious accommodations or their medical accommodations couldn't access EI either.
Did they have a human rights avenue for compensation up to 25,000, or was that like what they were trying to tell people to do? What was EI's reason for denying it?
From what I heard, and again, you guys, this is coming through the grapevine. Like I'm
Mhm.
trying my best to give an even
Well, you're
appreciation of the events that occurred, but I can only speak for myself.
sure, but you're far more honest than the last witness we just heard from. So
I
you can
try.
continue. I think people are listening and they believe you here. Please continue.
So, from what I heard, what needed to happen was there was a human rights complaint that was filed, and I don't know all the details, you guys. Like it's sort of fuzzy, especially with an acquaintance of mine, how they ended up getting their unemployment because they ended up applying for um, unemployment insurance because they were denied their religious exemption. And I think they had to file like a human rights complaint anyway. The
Mhm.
processing is so slow that they didn't get anything before they were put back
Right.
on the government's payroll when they came back in June. So I think that's still a pending case. I don't know exactly what's happening with that, but yes, you need to, if you're denied IE for initially, you need to do an appeal,
Right.
as far as I understand.
Yeah, and I think the policy, or if they come in with a mandate, here's a policy, you just choose not to do it, it's going to be tough on EI. If you can show harassment from your manager and maybe you're being signaled out because of your religion, and you're affirmed, then maybe there's a human rights avenue for you. But it's gonna be tough. Now, I think the good news is we're going to have to address this at some point. A lot of people lost a lot of money. They lost their income for, well, you lost it for over half a year, 8 months or so.
It was tough.
Yeah,
A lot of
so
people had to grab other jobs.
well, that's what Canadians do when they're down. They get up and they do what they have to do. And this particular group that got, segmented and isolated, we were able to take it. So I'm glad to hear from you. I'm glad you're doing better. You're back with your civil job and you plan on staying there. So I take it that you are a true civil servant. So you're doing it for the people. How do you feel going back after that happened? I'm sure you had colleagues that you would sit with and you had great relationships with before that maybe are not so friendly with you. And what's it like going back to that environment when you know that your managers and your leaders kind of turn their back on you?
Well, that's a really, really good question, and I need to think about that for a
Yeah,
minute.
because I can imagine it'd be tough. I've gone into situations that were difficult, but not like that, where the people around you kind of betrayed you in a way.
I think everybody was surprised that the Treasury Board made this decision, especially due to the environment that I work in. Like, I'm not a danger to anybody. My
Yeah,
job
I
can
can
be
imagine.
conducted remotely, and I did a lot for the team that I was with, and a lot of people that were affected by the policy, they were in the similar boat. Like they, did a good chunk of the workload. So their colleagues really, really appreciated them, and they had a good rapport with their colleagues. For me, the boots on the ground colleagues that I worked with day to day, they were baffled and they were upset. And management, even though that they expressed displeasure at me being let go, they sort of put their hands behind their back and said, I can't do anything about this. I
Yeah.
would like to help you, but I can't because it's a directive coming down on high. Even people higher up the chain, even though they said, Anon, that's too bad. I wish I could help you, but my hands are tied. It's a direct order from the PMO to the Treasury Board to
Right.
the Federal Public Service.
Now,
As
what?
for right
Sorry.
now,
Mhm.
everything is back to normal, and I don't feel any resentment or any ill will toward these people. Like they didn't do it, it's not their fault. Sorry, Jason,
No,
go ahead.
no, that's wonderful because I'm glad to hear that come full circle almost. And it seems like we keep hearing 80%, 85, 90, 95 people are percent vaccinated. But it also feels like they didn't follow the narrative, and maybe they didn't push it as much because they're accepting you back. They understand what they went through, and they're trying to get back to normal. What do you think would happen if another mandate comes through? What if there's another one? Do you
Well,
anticipate you'll have to go on leave again, or do you think there will be accommodations this time? Do you think we're going to learn from the last round?
I truly believe that there is going to be more pushback because I have heard rumblings from my colleagues saying, you know, I was fine with the first two. I accepted what the politicians in public health were saying to me. I got my first two. I happily did that, but the third, fourth, fifth, nth injection is a subscription service, and we don't want to be dealing with a subscription health service. So we will be pushing back. Now, whether that's going to materialize, that opinion is going to materialize into action if the mandates come back. Don't mean to be pessimistic, but is something to be seen.
So there's some faith in government has been lost, even within government. So is that because, well, I want to be careful about this because we're on YouTube. So I want to be careful where I go with this next question. But do you think minds are changing because of recent information about effects, or do you think minds are changing because it was a human rights charter issue? Do you think minds are changing because we're hearing more information, or a combination of all of those? For the people around you, what do you think is their motivator for changing the minds from going ahead to getting it for 2 doses and then slowly not doing that anymore?
From what I've heard, everybody's tired, right? Like they were promised 2 weeks to flatten the curve, you know, wear the mask, social distance, the virus will go away, get your 2 injections, the primary series of injections. The data says that X, Y, and Z, it prevents transmission, you know, prevents infection. You won't have a severe clinical outcome if you get these injections. And people have family members that unfortunately are experiencing breakthrough infections or are experiencing severe clinical outcomes even after having the shot. So I think they are observing themselves and are realizing that, hey, we've been lied to and we're tired of doing this and we just want to go back to normal. Of course, you're going to have a segment of the population that's still rah, gung-ho about it, but the fluid majority that's sort of in the middle of the road is starting to, I think, to switch to, you know, we tried your interventions didn't do what was promised to us, which was a complete 180 back to normal. Like we'd never need to do these things again, but yet we're a nation that's 90% plus vaccinated, and that's not happening.
Yeah, no, it was quite the narrative. It was a story. It sounded very fictitious at the beginning too. Yep. Let's check the chats. Nothing there. So what happens when the next government comes in, and will the trust be returned? So an election will be happening in a year or sometime in the near future, and the next government comes in. Do you think that trust can be rebuilt? Do you want to see anything happen? Do you want to see anybody held accountable? What would you like to see if you're still around when the next government takes over, assuming it switches? What would you like to see happen around the office?
Personally, I would like to see a public inquiry opened up into this as well, and exactly what went on. And I'm hoping that the pertinent documents won't be redacted. Like today we saw, you know, some correspondence between the Prime Minister or the PMO and Mayor Jim Watson. Some of those things were redacted under Section 37, which I believe, what is Section 37, you guys? Is that the national security thing, or things that cannot be said to the public?
You're asking a great question. I can't say right now.
So yeah, I'm hoping that most of the lid gets blown off of most of these things, and I'd also like to see some a third party join the audit as well, like a neutral third party, because again, who watches the watchers, right?
Right. Independent, you mean?
Yeah, independent. Yes, I see where you're going with this. Yes, independent. I would like to see an independent body do some auditing on that as well. And I just wanted to add before I forget, since I'm bouncing around here, and this is again sort of a little bit off the topic, going back to what we were talking about 5 minutes ago. When the Treasury Board proclaims we are 98% vaccinated, you really have to wonder how many of those people ended up begrudgingly getting it because they couldn't afford their mortgage or couldn't afford to feed their kids or
Many.
couldn't lose their job, right? So just because you have 98% compliance doesn't mean if you let that unfold organically, you would have those numbers absolutely.
Well, I'm surprised. Well, I'm not surprised, but they should have asked on your questionnaire, is this by willingness? Like there should have been a question there that said, if your job wasn't related, would you take it? And to find out how many of these people took it only for the job would be an interesting number, because I think you would find it's a large percentage of it.
I wish, but that would put a dent in the narrative that they're trying to spin, right? Look at these noble public servants. They're all compliant. They're doing it. They're doing it for the population. They're doing it for their families and the grandmas and yada, 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 yada. But that's not the case. And I find that statistically, not always, it's not axiomatic, but usually any population and any subpopulation thereof is going to have the same ratio of, let's say, X to Y, if X and Y make up 100%. So if you've got like 25% of people that are remaining unvaccinated for whatever reason, well, in the public service, I would expect to see similar numbers, right? So I would say personally that like 15% plus were coerced.
At least. I think at least.
At least.
Yeah, at least if you look at the numbers of people who did it voluntarily before your mandate started to come down, there was a period of time from about January 2021 to, I guess, October for you, 2021, where it was voluntary. You had the late night shows, tooting it like crazy, Rachel Maddow. You had all these people during that period of time telling you to go take it. So there was a voluntary period of time. I believe what the numbers could show is from the time that the mandate kicked in and on, you can kind of assume roughly, loosely, that everybody from that date on were coerced because they had to. If they wanted it, they would have had it before then. So when work then said you have to take it, everybody that took it from that date on, you could kind of put into the category of needed to do it for work. Everybody that took it before that date, you can put into the category of voluntary. They wanted to. So if we did that, I would be surprised to find it would be a less than 15% that were kind of coerced or under duress when they did it. I think at some point in the future, it might be years away, but we'll have a Supreme Court decision on what duress meant in this situation. And then I think there will be a bit of a fallout because this was duress. My own neighbor shook his hand, strong man, works the fields out here. He was one of the silent victims because he was very, very scared of it, but he had no choice. His employment was too necessary for him. And that's unfortunate. Now, with Pfizer, that little information that came up with Pfizer claiming they didn't test for transmission, I want to just say something about that. Pfizer, if you look in the documents, never did say it would stop it. It was media and government from that point on that was saying that. So right now we're seeing a lot of pushback from people, especially on Facebook, claiming Pfizer and big pharma never said it was going to stop transmission. It was everybody else after that. Do you think that this information coming out for Pfizer is going to change anything at all? At least when it comes to trusting the government going forward? Because not only did they change the narrative, it was completely false. There was never anything for them to base their narrative that it was going to stop transmission. The pharma companies didn't say that. Even scientists didn't say that, and doctors didn't say that. It was just the media and the government. How do we stop that in the future, Anon? How do we stop that? Do we need a commission to filter all the government statements? Do we have to fact check them real time? Or do we just have to elect people we can trust and put some sort of oversight over them?
Another very, very good question that I need to take a minute to compose my answer. There's a lot
Sure.
to unpack with your statement. So
Yeah.
the first thing that I'm going to look at is the recent communications by Pfizer, and I believe it's the European Court of Inquiry. I don't know exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody can throw that in the chat, especially Wayne or someone. But yeah, it came out. It was an MP equivalent out there, and he asked the questions, and he got the answer. No trials.
So when the Pfizer representative was speaking, she's like, "Oh, our clinical trials never had transmission as an endpoint," and for me, I like to sit down and peruse scientific journals. It's a little bit of a hobby of mine, so I like to sit and I've got the prerequisite. I'm not going to try and give too much away, but I've got the prerequisite education to understand exactly what they're talking about. So I was curious. I read the clinical trials for these jobs, and they never had transmission as an endpoint to begin with. So
That's
she's not lying. But the problem is I think there was a huge regulatory failure with all of our established governmental bodies, especially in the United States of America, like the CDC and the FDA, especially dropped the ball on this case, whereas they should have been extremely scrutinous of the claims coming out of any drug company, because as your chat probably knows, Pfizer's been charged with
billions.
now I need
They're the
billion.
largest
Yeah, let's
fine.
just
Yeah,
say
they had the
billions.
largest fine in history.
They were found guilty for a handful of things that are extremely distasteful and extremely dishonest. And for those things, you guys can probably look it up on Wikipedia or find it on the internet. But that right there should have been a red flag. Like, once you as a corporation lie, well, now all of the bodies, the governmentally established bodies that are supposed to be protecting their people from drugs that might not be so kosher hitting the market should have actually stepped up to the plate. But that didn't happen, and it was overshadowed by the panic of, how bad is this actually going to be? Our healthcare systems, like, they haven't been good before. Well, is this the 1% IFR that's now going to tip our healthcare systems over the edge, or funerary systems over the edge, or our social systems over the edge? So I understand what the panic was about, but it doesn't excuse the regulatory failing. And as you know, the FDA, I believe, was primarily involved in evaluating drugs when the thalidomide tragedy dropped. And I believe it was Great Britain versus the USA. In the USA, there was one lady who stopped giving thalidomide to pregnant women because thalidomide was supposed to take over the role of a barbiturate for morning sickness to attenuate the symptoms of morning sickness. And she's like, well, we don't have any data on this cohort. We don't know what it'll do to the pregnant woman or her fetus, so no. Whereas I believe Great Britain went ahead with this, and they had like an explosion of birth defects, and it was only until 5 years later when they figured out, oh goodness, it was the thalidomide that ended up causing this. So any drug should be subjected to a review by the governmental review panels, and also have a battery of clinical data behind it. And that's why vaccines, they usually have that 8 to 12 years of jabs in arms before you find out exactly how effective it is, and of course how safe it is too, because there's things that in science that everybody thinks that science is something that that's ubiquitous with truth, but it's not. It's a system for evaluating hypotheses, and if you don't have a proper experiment set up to evaluate a certain endpoint, you're not going to have data for that.
Correct.
And of course, you can also have data that you collect, and if your experiment is flawed, then that data isn't going to be reflecting reality either. So again, like, the more you need a lot of fingers in the pie to evaluate these things, and of course, those fingers need to be honest, which I'm baffled. Like I said, we're witnessing a giant regulatory failure, and it's like, is it because of panic? Like, do we all just let our emotional centers take over? This is what we're left with, and especially, sorry, you guys, I'm rambling, but
Please
the
continue.
current, the current bivalent booster. Now, sure, yeah, this should have sort of been done in the beginning if you wanted any chance at preventing a beta coronavirus from running through your population. You'd want an antigen that was not only accessible, like the spike protein, but you might want some of the other structural proteins in there as well that are less mutagenic than the spike protein, like let's say the nucleocapsid, for example. So the more antigens you have, the better off you're probably going to be for invoking positive
Response.
immunity in a population, and that's not 100% considering serological is better than cellular, like in oral or nasal mucosa, if that
Okay,
makes any
so
sense. So
well,
sorry, I
clearly,
just get
no,
really
no, no.
passionate about this.
Great, because my next question, I think you might be able to answer it. Do you know the difference between leaky vaccine and perfect vaccine?
Yes, I don't believe that a perfect vaccine has ever hit the market. It's always been like, even with a traditional series of vaccines that use inactivated or attenuated viruses, it's always been like 95% plus. But again, with a beta coronavirus, because it changes so rapidly, it's very, very hard to nail down a response to a beta coronavirus antigen that will produce long-term immunity. And you can see how this unfolded. And I'm not this just to say, I'm not an expert on this, you guys, but you can sort of see the writing on the wall, how everything unfolded, and anybody can see this, right? Like, you don't need to understand science. You just need to understand like how the virus is behaving in the population, which we can all see with our own two eyes. And then, of course, the governmental response to this too, which is now, I'm launching bivalent boosters now just to see if we can stop Omicron from ripping through the population. But again, the virus will change. And I do believe that if you have a vaccine that's leaky enough, which I dare say that these vaccines are, and this is just my personal opinion.
Not just, you're not alone.
If you have a vaccine that's leaky enough, then you're going to have some positive selection pressure. The vaccinator are going to have some positive selection pressure in driving the evolution of that virus.
Right. And I don't think many people understand that. So just give me a second. I'm going to break down leaky just quickly for some of the listeners here. A leaky vaccine, like Anand just mentioned, is basically all of them. But a really bad leaky vaccine is one that doesn't kill off the virus, doesn't really cause it to stop affecting, and it doesn't stop the transmission. But it does keep the host alive. It does help people survive. So when we get a vaccine, when we were first told it's going to stop transmission, it's going to stop people from getting sick, and you can go out and enjoy life. That would be a near perfect vaccine if that was true, because people were getting breakthroughs, and then eventually breakthrough went away, and then a whole bunch of people were getting it, and then the narrative changed that, yeah, of course you can get it. That's proof that it's leaky, because it's just not effective. It's not as effective as they were planning it to be from infection. When the narrative also then changed to it'll keep you out of the hospital. So take it to keep yourself out of the hospital and other people out of the hospital. This is again proof that it's leaky. It's not fully effective. One of the scary parts about a leaky vaccine that's out in public is it mutates. It's a breeding ground for mutation. So a whole bunch of petri dishes. Every human that is surviving with the virus and the vaccine is a petri dish, and this is where mutations and variants can come from. So there was a study in 2015 that was quite popular. It went around a lot in the science journals at the time, that this would be something we would make sure we don't do. And then 7 years later, 6 years later, we're doing exactly that. in my opinion. This was not tested enough, and it's now proven to be a sieve. It's leaky all over the place. Sorry about that, Anon. I just wanted to kind of bring people up to speed a bit on the basics of a leaky vaccine and the consequences it can give us if we actually allow it to happen.
No, that's good, and I'm happy that you spoke about that there, Jason, and filled the audience in who might not know. And I just, just to go off your point, I think it would have been better if, like, for example, India, Bharat Biotech ended up manufacturing a vaccine called Covaxin. This is a whole attenuated virus vaccine, so it contains. It's still based off of the Wuhan type strain, but
You're
it
not on
contains.
Facebook, are you?
Am I on Facebook?
Yeah.
No.
This is the debate I just had this morning on exactly that.
No, I usually stay away from social media these days. But
no, please continue. I'm gonna go look for that because I might pull that up on the screen. Keep going.
But Bharat Biotech in India, they ended up developing Covaxin, which again was the full viron attenuated virus vaccine, or inactivated, excuse me, not just attenuated, but inactivated. And they, from what I understand, like, unless the spotlight isn't on them and they're not collecting data, but from what I've heard with my ear to the ground, they're not having half as many problems as the Western nations who adopted the transfection technologies like the mRNA and the viral vector vaccine technologies are. So if I were the person calling the shots, I'd be like, well, perhaps we should be focusing on bringing in Covaxin instead, which uses a legacy technology and its safety profile is very well established, but also not mandating the thing either. Like, if I want to go forward and get some degree of herd immunity, well, the risk for this disease is stratified. So the older people, I would recommend, get the Covaxin, but the younger people, as you keep going down, well, there's not much risk for those people.
Sorry. Covaxin, and then what? Covifez? Have you heard of that one?
Let's take a read.
I'm trying to make this bigger for you.
And I hope I just didn't dox myself by talking about all this.
No, I'm sure. No, the 12 people here will silence themselves, and then the hundreds that watch it later won't put it together. And we won't talk about any more about where you work or what you actually do. So yeah, I was getting this morning. Quite the conversation went back and forth on one of my posts on the effectiveness of vaccines in the narrative. And this person rightfully pointed out, and maybe earlier in the post, that the information was out that transmission was not something tested for. So I've gone through these, and I'm going to invite this person as well at some point. And maybe, Anon, if you are available, we can get you both on here. Because it's clear that there's all these different types of vaccines out there, and North America doesn't even know about a bunch of them. So I'm thankful that people like you and this person is bringing it to light.
Yeah, they put together a very, very nice package of information, sort of technical for somebody, looking at it as is, but anybody who is familiar with some of the lexicon, scientific lexicon, they would probably be nodding their head yes, just like I am right now.
Yeah. No, I read this and it came out of left field, and I'm like, okay, well, they're correct, because it was pushback on one of my posts because I was simplifying, because I was using the mainstream narrative and the government narrative, which doesn't jive with the pharmaceutical. So this person was reaching out and saying, hey, the pharmaceutical companies didn't say that. It was government that said that. And I agree. Now, one of your solutions that you mentioned was possibly having government more involved, doing more tests, having their fingers involved more. But it's also that same government that let us down this time. So how do we build a new department or a new way to do it so that the same department we thought we had before, which was supposed to protect us, how do we actually fix it then? It's the same government.
Again, super complicated question. Lots of moving parts there. I don't have all the answers. I might just be able to give you a layman's or a layman or a plebeian's take on policy. But again, I think that audit. Like, the government, again, dropped the ball, and it sort of ironically now made a new generation of people who are true anti-vaxxers, not just,
That's right.
oh yeah, I've had all my my childhood primary series of vaccination. Maybe I took one of those protein subunit hepatitis to go on vacation, and I was happy to roll up my sleeve and do that. But now you've created a whole slew of people who are going to be questioning whatever they put into their arms. Yeah. Yep. So I think like the road to rebuilding that trust in government and public health is going to be very long and very rocky, because it takes years to establish trust and, well, months to ruin it, which has happened here. And that sort of breaks my heart, right? Like, the government, for all intents and purposes, are supposed to be working for their people, not against, and not engaging in needless rhetoric or dogma.
I agree completely, and that's my concern, because what happens if we do continue to deteriorate our trust in government, not just the medical side of things, but economic, safety, global position, global stage? What if we could just keep losing confidence? I like to think that we don't have a broken government. What we have is some misguided leaders, because our government is made up of neighbors like you. The people who actually show up and do the work, elected or not. Our government is made up of the people. It's the leadership, so the elected and the non-elected leadership, that I'm having difficulties with. I don't want to get into necessarily global organizations and influence on that one yet.
I know where you're going.
But there's no question we have a terminology in Canada called global science. So I've interviewed a government scientist. He used that term freely on Twitter to explain to me that there's upstream science. So coming down to the federal government, there's upstream science, and they call it global science. He was unable to explain to me why they've accepted the recommendations that were coming down, because that was our original question. Like, you have a recommendation on fertilizer. We would like to understand it more. And he's the agricultural scientist. He's the one that's supposed to answer it. And his response was, go Google information not from Canadian sources and look at the global science, and you'll get your answers. I'm not comfortable with that, because, as you mentioned before, science isn't a certainty. There isn't a finite science. It's not like we're eventually going to discover all of science and then we're done. Science is a discovery process. It's a learning process, and it's always going to change as we discover more and learn more. So how do we, to bring this all the way back, so we're not running in circles, how do we get the confidence back into government without sounding like we're trying to close the borders to global information? But we definitely want to highlight that we should be doing our own homework here. I don't have a problem with any global source saying, take a look at this and here's some recommendations, but Canadians shouldn't be just adopting it as is. We should be at least looking at it and examining it. And this is the department you kind of alluded that we need, is another stronger department of scientists and experts who can really go through and tell us the truth. I don't see a way of building that, to be honest with you, unless we open up all meetings to streaming online. There's no such thing as closed door meetings anymore in government. It would be at least a good start to understand who's talking to the government when it comes to the specialists and scientists and policies, and what does the conversation look like? I don't know another way, because we've been doing this for 150 years under Confederation. We've been swapping parties back and forth ever since, and they don't really hold each other accountable, and they're not really opposition. They're just government in waiting. So I don't see under our current system a magic bullet, and I think that's what you also identified as well. There's no easy solution to this. But what do you think about more transparency with every meeting has to be streamed, and more independent MPs making their way in there who are not under a whip and a platform? Do you think that could at least start opening the door to more accountability and more transparency in our current system without having to tear the system down and rebuild it. Do you think that that could be a good way, or at least one way, to start opening that door to transparency?
Absolutely. I think that unfortunately both sides of the aisle have become so entrenched in their own ideology and dogma. It's pretty much like if you have a head of a chihuahua grafted to both your right and left shoulders and they're just yelling in your ear all the time or like barking in your ear all the time. That's what I'm getting from the current state of politics in the Western Hemisphere. And it's like I'm sick and tired of hearing dogma. I would rather have, solutions. And whether you guys are forced to work together, like everybody sits down, gets along, and builds our crumbling systems back how they should be. And I believe that was the current, or not current, but the legacy purpose of government was to actually have a diverse marketplace of opinions and ideas coming together, and then the best ideas get selected for to build a better society. But I don't know what we have right now. Like I'm just baffled. Like I'm completely lost for words, and it's hard because I'm a centrist, right? Like I like ideas from both ends, but it's turned into like nothing gets done. Everybody just screams at each other. So yes, more independent voices are I think better, and I need to see the political class, or the political caste rather, not doing any form of gatekeeping to the public. Like the public should be involved at every step of the way. I should be able to write my MP and get an answer back, which I've written my MP on a multitude of occasions, and I haven't gotten anything back. Not even an acknowledgement from their one of their staffers. So it's like I feel a little bit crestfallen with how this has turned out, and I have to say that I'm really grateful to you. You taking this time with me. We've chatted on Twitter before. We've established some rapport, so to speak, and that's very valuable. And there needs to be, I believe, more people like you that are in levels of government or going for a level of government, whether it be municipal, provincial, or federal. I think that's extremely valuable because your independent voice, well, since you're not part of any party, you keep everybody else accountable. We need more of that.
Yeah, and I think representation government is the answer that you're asking for there, because that's what we originally had. It's morphed into a party-based government, and now it's morphing into a globalist-based government. So we're going higher up the chain of top-down government than we intended to, and we should ever do. I believe government is supposed to be local, local issues, local problems, local solutions. There's no way that you can have somebody in another country or another city, like, I don't know, let's randomly pick one, Davos, telling you exactly how much fertilizer to put on your ground, when region to region, neighborhood to neighborhood is different. So we need to be able to handle things locally. Good news is that Canada has a constitution, and section 91, 92 lay all of that out. It's supposed to be a representation government, which means we've given the jurisdiction to the federal and provincial governments on very specific items, explicit, and everything else was supposed to be left with us. The default to the Constitution is we hold the power, the people, except for where we gave it to you. And it's not the other way around. A lot of people think that the government gives you your rights and gives you your freedoms. That's 100% incorrect. What actually happens is the people give the government the right to go ahead and infringe on our liberty when necessary. That's all we've done in our agreement with the government. However, they have taken advantage of it. Each party moved the needle a little bit further towards federalism. Neither party really pushed back on any of it. And I do agree, because this is why I'm running, that even just one or two voices that are truly independent, who are not looking to get back into the graces of their party, to get back into the party, but a true independent who went in there without a party, I think we'll have some big change. But I got to tell you, it's tough, because when you're independent, all sides hate you. There is
Yeah, you're definitely fighting against everybody.
Yeah, no, there's no day that goes by where I don't say something that upsets somebody, because I don't have one single view. and I kind of call that spectrum ideology, where I'm on the whole spectrum. It's not one single thing. And I think that's the way we were all designed and built. We were supposed to have lots of ideas and ideology, and trying to put us into a single box is where trouble started. Then you get your tribalism and us versus them. And that's never really a huge benefit when it comes to representation government. So
Absolutely. I agree
how do you,
100%.
yeah, now without giving out any provinces or anything like that, what do you think about Danielle Smith and her sovereignty push? And are you actually aware of what that means? Because a lot of people think sovereignty means we're going to cut the border and ship us away, when it doesn't. Do you have an opinion on that one?
Well, my opinion is going to be extremely undeveloped, since I haven't done too much reading on Danielle Smith or the Sovereignty Act that you mentioned there. But from what I understand, is that it's not a push for deconfederation, like splitting the western and eastern halves of the country. That's not what Danielle is trying to get at. What Danielle would like to do is go back to the living tree doctrine that our constitution was pointing to, that the needs of the provinces change over time, and that each province should be able to determine its own destiny and how much of its resources it gets to control versus, I guess, how should I put this? Again, lost for words there, you guys.
Restricted by another power.
Exactly, restricted by another power. For example, the federal government versus the provincial government, and how much leeway each should get. And I think what Danielle is so upset about is that the Western provinces are not being represented as they should. Ottawa is sticking their hands in pies that they should not be. Yeah, exactly what Clay said. Danielle feels that Alberta isn't getting the control that it should actually have, as outlined by the Constitution.
Correct. And that would be section 92 and 92A that you mentioned there. So 92A is resource rights. That belongs to the province. Always has.
I have reading to do.
Yeah, it always has, and it should always stay there. And you did really good. So yeah, this is what Danielle's up to. She's trying to return us back to the Constitution. Quebec is the only province that's really been fighting really hard to maintain their sovereignty all along. A lot of Canada looks at Quebec and says, hey, you guys are just whiny. No, actually, they were pushing quite hard to maintain their sovereignty. And because of that, they do have some concessions from the federal government that no other province gets to enjoy. So Danielle's and Mo, so Saskatchewan as well, and I suspect Manitoba and BC will be right behind them, are now going to start enforcing it. Now, I don't think it's going to rip up the country at all. I think what Ontario and the East needs to understand is, with the government out of a lot of your business, some of your pain and suffering will go away. Quebec being able to develop their resources and BC being able to develop the resources will help a lot. Okay, just going to keep an eye on the stream here because it just pops back on. We were talking the entire time. Did you see that?
We had a really good conversation.
yeah. I'm going to have to go get my lunch after this, which is just fine with me. But yeah, I do support Danielle Steele. I keep getting her mixed up with the novelist Danielle Smith, because that was my platform too. My platform's always been a return to the Constitution. We don't need to make new laws. We have laws that we can start utilizing. So going back to sovereignty is a fantastic start. I think the provinces are mature enough. They're old enough. They've established the province quite well. I think it's time for that to happen. And I also, as my platform, is the independent oversight. And I think without it, we're just going to continue to have two sides to this country that's fighting it, fighting each other, whether it's left and right, or liberal and conservative, or east and west. There will always be a divide. And if we don't start tackling the real issues and start bringing these two sides together and finding some more unity, I think it's just going to be a lot of headaches. But I'm very optimistic, Anon, because people like you are speaking. We're getting the voices out. We're getting the messages out. And just like Jim Watson said this morning, this is all unprecedented. It's never happened to us before, and this inquiry is one step in that direction too.
It's thanks, Jason, and I mean, like, again, like, what you're doing is invaluable, and I have to say it's scary. It's terrifying. I've never ever, walked onto a platform to be interviewed by an independent MP candidate, and I'm hoping that I'm not gonna all of a sudden get a call and be like, "Hey, you're fired. we we found evidence that you're talking about stuff you shouldn't be talking about." So, yeah,
No, I'm sure
it's
you'll
at
be
risk.
fine. Yeah, and if
At
you do
risk
get
to
into
me.
trouble, yeah, if you do anything happens, hit me up. There's whistleblower laws. There's a whole bunch of things that can protect you if it ever goes into a weird direction for you. I suspect nothing will happen.
I tried to keep it as neutral as possible and not say anything that I shouldn't be saying. So,
Hey, and as James put it, it's a great chat. I think this is the kind of stuff that Canadians need to hear. And thank you for being brave and doing it. And if we want to follow up, we'll do another one. And if you ever get to the point where you can let us know who you are, the world would support you. But until then, we've got a lot of things to be careful with, and we have this inquiry to get through. And I hope you're right. I hope that whether I'm in it or not, the 45th Parliament has some more inquiries and gets deeper into the vaccine, COVID, the response, financial stimulus. There's a few issues that we really need to re-examine because they were made quickly. The decisions were made quickly, and it doesn't necessarily it didn't necessarily help us. And we should at least minimally learn from it. Let's not let this mistake go by without at least a lesson. But thank you, Anon. I think they're going to be kicking off any moment now. And if there's anything you'd like to say in closing, go ahead.
well, again, thank you very much. I can't express my gratitude for you letting me speak on the stream, and thanks very much to chat. Thank you so much for your fanfare. I really, really appreciate it, and I'll keep on watching, and we'll see how this unfolds. And of course, if you need to get me again, you know exactly where to find me.
Great. Is your book going to be on Amazon, or we'll find it in bookstores near you? Take care, Anon.
I'm not smart enough to write a book.
You're brilliant. You're brilliant. You take care.
You too. Bye for now, guys.
All right, folks. Ooh, getting a little bit tired, but that was a good afternoon so far. We saw the end of Jim Watson there, and then the beginning of a bit of a surprise witness because he wasn't on the list, but Kim Ayotte of Emergency and Protective Services. Good witness so far because he just flat out is telling the truth. Emergency lanes were open. They had the red zone. It would change. They had bylaw acting differently based on the vehicle. There's a lot of stuff coming up there, and he's painting a very different picture than some of our other witnesses who were saying it was, well, as Jim Watson would say a whole bunch of times, hell. Hell has emergency lanes open. Hell has services being provided. It did sound like they were very paranoid about potential problems, so they wanted to be very protective of their staff, especially bylaw officers, and I can understand that. But there's a big distinction between presuming or assuming or being paranoid about being attacked and danger, and then there actually being danger or safety concerns. Just because there's a group of people who have beards and jackets with flags on it means nothing. Okay, people, let's stop being super sensitive. It means nothing. Nonviolent people are nonviolent people. Peaceful protesters and peaceful people come in all different shapes and sizes. Just because there's a flag, which is our national flag, on them doesn't mean anything. Ditto with their cars. Just because there's a flag on the car, you're going to treat it differently. And I do want to kind of reach out to the residents of downtown. Are you paying attention to what's being said here? They are being very upfront and very open about leaving the problems you were complaining about right where they were. So cars that should have been moved were not moved. Nobody was ticketed that should, well, I don't say nobody, but vehicles that should have been ticketed were not ticketed. And we heard testimony before that had they ticketed, would that have been a motivator or an incentive to move for the owners of the vehicles to move. And common sense would say, yeah, probably. If the owners of those vehicles were getting daily tickets or hourly tickets, they might have absolutely moved. So to the residents of Ottawa who are very upset and put in all of the frustration towards the protesters, I do want to point out that the protesters are not the ones responsible for redirecting 911 calls or redirecting permission and authority. You should really pay attention to what was being said there, because they were allowing the situation to grow. They weren't moving vehicles when they could have. They weren't going into the situations and dealing with minor issues or even problems because they were saying they were too scared. Well, fire, bylaw, you would have been fine, and you would have had a plate of food, you could have eaten, you could have danced, you could have enjoyed yourself, and you could have walked out. You would have been fine. There was absolutely no reason to believe, other than the rhetoric coming from our government, that there was any dangerous situation there. And I still have yet to see a single video from anybody that shows bylaw officers, fire, paramedic, or even the police themselves struggling to deal with a single situation. You would expect maybe to see a situation arise and then they get really cautious from it, but there wasn't even a situation that first arose to give them justification to be that cautious and that paranoid over it. Hey, Wayne, welcome back. How could they not be on the list? Well, the list, it does say preliminary list. All right, so let me show the list to you because we do have a few moments here. So the list can change, as we just saw. So this is not unheard of. This is not weird or normal, abnormal. This happens. So here we go. Preliminary. So it means it can change. And actually gives you the warning right there, subject to change. So we just had Jim Watson, and every witness up to this point has been in order so far. We were expecting Diane Deans next. And if we look, I don't find Jim on here at all. But that's okay. The more information, the better. And it might have been a deal where maybe some of the testimony that came up encouraged him to bring him as a witness. They really don't have to declare who's coming and who's not. It's a preliminary list. Sorry, Jason. What was the bald guy's name? There's a few of them, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure which one you're referring to. I guess you might be talking about the lawyer. I think it's Donald something. I'm going to have to get better at keeping track of the names. I do have a list of all the organizations that got standing, so I can be quick at putting that into the ticker. But over the next couple of weeks, I'll start collecting the names. Fair enough. Just figures. Yeah, no, fair enough. Well, it's an inquiry. So, and all the documents and information and statements would have been already provided. So there's a good chance he already provided some sort of statement because he would have been a potential witness or called or identified as a possible witness. He just didn't make the preliminary list. And that could be for a whole bunch of different reasons. But it was most likely people knew that he could have been called at any time, and any information he was going to give or evidence has already been entered. The last bald guy, the public safety dude. Okay, yeah, no, I do have his name. It's Jim. Well, it's here in the clicker here, or the banner. No, Kim, not Jim. Kim. Yeah, Kim Ayette. So far, very honest. So looking forward to the second half of his testimony. And of course, for Brendan Miller to go and ask some questions. But you can see the difference between this witness and Jim Watson. Jim Watson was embellishing, using words like hell and stuff like that, and really telling the story of just chaos, businesses losing money. And again, vaccine passports, the government was closing things down, and they established red zones. The government is very responsible for any of those losses. Could be why they spent $20 million covering those losses. No, thank you. When in doubt, check. Yeah, I'm trying to keep that there just to give everybody a heads up on who's talking and who are these talking heads and what their names or positions are. So yeah, I'll keep that going, and I'll try to start catching the names of the various lawyers, because there's quite a few of them. So I'll try and get that for you. and comment earlier as my phone was dead. I'm sorry. Very different day. Yeah, first world problems. You couldn't comment on the live stream, so I'm glad you're able to make that work out. And we thank you for coming, Wayne. It's getting late for you, I'm sure. So thank you very much for being here. All right, so we got about 7 more minutes. If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But I think this witness is doing a good job on bringing the truth forward. I'm not catching a narrative like Jim had. I was trying to show the contrast between Jim and this particular witness, Jim and Kim. Kim was just being honest and upfront, and it was clear there was a structure put in place for coordinating information. At least on the police side of things and the bylaw side of things, it sounded like it was a little bit more coordinated when it came to information coming in. We found out earlier, though, yesterday and last week, that the information getting to the top was convoluted. So they were getting contradicting information. So I'm curious. They have this command center, which Kim is talking about here, that was supposed to be coordinating things, but yet the information coming out of it and possibly another organization was conflicting. I stayed away from joining the stream. I'm sorry, Wayne. Yeah, if you get up to it, yeah, my apologies, my friend. If you get up to it and you want to share your story, I think people would understand and be quite thankful to hear some of your story. I also have a video coming out with Wayne. It's been very busy trying to do the stream and all that stuff, but I did a great interview with Wayne. I think it was 2.5 hours, Wayne. So we'll be publishing that as well. But if you want to take some questions or join the stream, Wayne, anytime, I'd love to have you. And how about that anonymous caller? Kind of got that one by surprise. I wasn't expecting that. I'm constantly checking the messages because I do want to hear from every single one of you, and I do want to try and bring forward your thoughts and ideas as well. And when I was getting that message about, well, she was reaching out because she was watching the chat, and we were having a conversation about the federal government mandates, vaccines, etc. And she reached out privately and said she's got some information, but she wasn't comfortable putting it in the chat. So we talked a little bit back and forth, and make you comfortable. We can do this. Whatever works for her is what was important to me. And I thank you. If you're listening right now, you're one brave soul. You're the type of people that Canada needs who will speak up. A lot of us know that we feel a little embarrassed as Canadians because we should have been a lot firmer and stronger on some of this, but we are a little bit polite and passive sometimes. So I'm glad to see that there's people who are standing up. They're tired of what's going on, and they want to make sure that their voices are heard and the true information is coming out. It was sad to hear how harsh they were on staff and how lenient they were on the MPs. So there's definitely two classes in our government: those who make the rules and those that have to follow by them. Not the same group. And the debate that we were having in the chat wasn't so much around whether or not all federal employees were exempt from mandate. It was the fact that some federal employees were exempt from the mandate. And even if it was just one, maybe the PM, that's one too many. So if you're going to go around mandating other people to put something into their arm to continue to work, then you should at least be living by the same mandate. But as we found out, with MPs being an elected official, apparently there's laws that protect them. And interestingly enough, we don't have the same laws. The truth is we do. The human rights, the charter, all of those are the same laws. They just got special permission because they're the lawmakers. It's really as simple as that. And then by saying, well, they couldn't go into the House, but they could do remote. Well, that's what I call overreach. It's a public house. Nothing's supposed to stop you from going in there. And the fact that a group of unvaxxed MPs were excluded from the House shows that that particular group was a marginalized group, and it was unprecedented. It's been a long time in Canada that somebody would be excluded from a public house, a government house, government services, airplanes based on a health decision. So even the MPs, they were excluded they were excluded from the public building, and we own that building. But maybe in the 45th Parliament, we'll hear some more stories about how they were trying to be frustrated with that and trying to do something about that. But as we all know, we had to change the Conservative Party leader. O'Toole was not vocal enough for everybody, and hopefully this new leader, he's going to follow through on some of the things he's talked about. Again, I'm independent, so I'm not actually for any particular party, so you can all hate me at the same time. But what I'd like to see is a change in leadership, a change in party, and a lot more accountability on the next one. What we don't want to see is the same problem with a different color for the party. Same problem, just from red to blue. All right. And I'm going to quickly check Twitter, see how we're doing there. Excellent. Now, if anybody wants to join the stream, don't be shy. You can do it anonymously. As you saw, I don't have a way to hide your voice. So so there's not one of those shows where I can do that. But if you want to come and tell your story, we're happy to hear it. And I know that, yeah, that's right. And I know that we can reach a few people here. And YouTube has been pretty good at pushing our videos. So that's going to help a bit as well. Great. Let me get the next stream ready. And if you have any more suggestions for me on things I can do to improve, I'll be happy to look it over. Unlike the government of Canada, I am willing to listen. I may not give you what you want. I may not do what you want, but I'll always listen, and I'll always explain at least my position so that we don't feel like anybody's not being listened to. Good. So the stream is working. I want to tell you guys how I had to fix my stream, because the first 2 days I was unsuccessful at getting the official stream. My trick was I was unable to get it if I was logged into my browser. So the techies out there, incognito, no problem getting the stream. Logged in via Chrome, wouldn't load up. I could go to another browser. I could go to Edge. It would load up. So identifying myself via Chrome on this stream is incompatible with the ability to receive the stream, which I found interesting. But I got a solution. Whatever the problem is, we found our way through it. So I'm glad on that one. And again, sorry for getting my stream cut off for about 2 minutes this morning. I know a bunch of people were dropped, and then YouTube was unlisting me and shadow banning me a little bit there. But there was no strike on my channel that I'm aware of. I took a look. It was kind of one of those, I should have known better. I played the song too long. But it's a really good song. So if you get the chance, go check out the Johnny Depp song. And it's, yeah, I'm not going to play it again. I would like to. I'll play it offline. And if there's anything else that you guys would like to see me do more of, anything I can throw in the ticker that might help you, just let me know. I'm not keeping track of the evidence numbers, but all the evidence is available. So if you ever want to see something brought up, maybe during one of the breaks, hit me up in the chat, give me the evidence ID number, and I'll go try and find it, and we can take a closer look at it. The idea here is to get as much information as possible, because who knows? It might be a while before we can get access to this kind of information again. And I'll ask, and maybe you can throw it in Twitter or Facebook as a comment later. What question do you have that you're really hoping to find the answer to? Is it related to the mandates? Is it related to vaccines? Is it related to government procedures? What rights they have? Maybe it's related to the jurisdiction of the government. What is federalism? All that stuff. Oh, I do want to point out, I think the commissioner, he's in good shape for us. I think he asked the right question of Mayor Jim at the end there, whether or not the province and the federal government on the policing level in that area would be equal partners. And I think it was important that we understand why he was asking that question, because the issues, the province was completely skipped on policing. It went from municipal straight to federal with the Emergency Act. As we heard, OPS was in charge, working with the truckers to move the vehicles, and then the Emergency Act was in place. You're not allowed to use Emergency Act if there's another way to deal with the situation. So I think what the commissioner discovered there was the province was skipped on the policing level. And then his clarifying question, which Jim first didn't answer, he didn't come close to answering it the first time. I'm thankful that the commissioner asked it a second time, exactly the same way, and nobody switched en français to answer it. We got the answer right away. And to me, it was a telling question. The question was saying, was there another option before the Emergency Act with the province? And I think because Jim had no choice then to really kind of, lay it out that, yeah, maybe 50-50 or maybe half and half. But no matter what, whether it's 95-5, province should have been one more step. And then we had, let me get the name of that group. Oh, the Canadian Constitution Foundation. Yeah, their question was great because it laid out whether or not that was the case. Was there other options? So Jim Watson wasn't very honest about his knowledge about the Emergency Act. He absolutely knows about the Emergency Act. And then he was very vague about the Ontario version of the Emergency Act. He most certainly knew about that one. He said he saw it, it was handed to him, he read it, but didn't understand it. That's not true. He absolutely understood it. And what the Canadian Constitution Foundation was getting at was you still had provincial options before the federal option. And he was laying out the specific rules and powers that would have been granted to the province had it been had they used it. So I think the commissioners smelling it, he knows, and the Canadian Constitution Foundation raised it very well, that the city had many options. Many options. Oh, we got a question here. James? My biggest concern is the permanent banking laws. Oh, yeah, we'll talk about that at the next break. Yeah, they did sneak some of those in, didn't they? Not all of them, not everything, but yeah, they are starting to clarify some laws. So next time the banks will just be far more cooperative. But thank you, James. We'll probably talk about that at next break or maybe on another stream if you remind me. And I do hear some sound coming from the stream here. So at any moment, we're going to have round 2 of this witness.
Order allowed.
Here we go. Enjoy, everybody. Thank you.
The commission is reconvened. La commission reprend.
Uh-oh, I didn't like those questions at the end there. I didn't like those questions at the end at all. Witness was saying to the commissioner, no. I think it's the first time I've witnessed the commissioner do what I would consider reaching for the answer he's looking for. That's the kind of first time I saw that. I didn't like that at all. It was uncomfortable. But this witness made it uncomfortable, I think, for anybody who's trying to push the agenda forward, that this was a huge emergency and the city was falling apart and they were on their last strings and all that stuff. And this witness didn't hold that up at all. This witness was very, excuse me, get rid of that banner. This witness was very good at telling it like it is again. So once again, we're hearing information like trucks were moving, the streets were empty. He walked himself and he counted trucks in the hundreds, not several hundreds. The one road from the picture that looked empty, they're really trying to establish that there were 70 trucks there. But what I was hearing from the witness was maybe the written document was not as accurate. The counts may not have been as accurate as the photos. But yeah, today was a big day, everybody. We had the mayor. I went through a lot of testimony with the mayor. And I think it fell apart at the end with this last witness, the surprise witness. He didn't corroborate much of what the mayor had to say. The mayor was very clear that it was the end of the world as far as Ottawa was concerned. And then at the same time, they handled it so well that they're an example for everybody else. So I would like to kind of just disregard most of what the mayor had to say, because he wasn't on the ground. He wasn't walking around. He wasn't meeting with people. So I'm going to kind of, hopefully the commission doesn't take too much credence into the mayor. He certainly had a bit of an agenda. I'm going to go see if there are more comments here. Yeah, the commissioner is asking leading questions. I didn't like that at all. They're supposed to be probing questions, or clarifying questions, where you're asking to receive information. You're not supposed to be asking yes/no questions. That's what a leading question is, where you provide the answer in the question. Are you standing there on that spot? Yes. Well, that's a leading question. Where are you standing? Well, I'm standing on the spot. That would be a clarifying question. You can still get the same answer or same information, but one way the question asker is providing the answer, and then the other one, you're just asking for the answer from the witness directly. Yeah, I've heard a few times liberal donor judge. Look, here's the thing, everybody. If you donate to a party, it shouldn't haunt you. It really shouldn't haunt you. So just because he was a low liberal donor, I don't think that should haunt him today. All it indicates is at the time he made a donation, he felt that he was helping the party that he was attracted to. But I didn't like that last question. That one's going to make me uncomfortable tonight. I'm going to replay that last little bit a bit. I might even clip it because I don't want to see too much of that. What do we got here? Hey, Kelly, welcome back. Wait to make this leading constant. Yes. Yeah, and that's what I didn't like about the Ottawa Police Services questions either. He was really trying to do it as well through leading questions, make it seem a lot worse than it was. But this witness did a pretty good job. So hopefully there was some good notes there, and hopefully this commissioner was just maybe trying to get the last bit of that narrative out of the fire truck and that hotel. But I also want to remind everybody, we keep coming back to that one hotel and one pig, one roasted pig, one hotel with one fire truck blocked, and each witness seems to keep bringing those two incidences up. So I wonder if they're implying that if there was no incident at that hotel and no roasted pig, then they could still be protesting today. I doubt it, but that's really all they have. They're really reaching here. Hopefully he isn't biased. Well, everybody is biased in some way, and a good judge, a good commissioner, a good justice has the ability to make decisions based on the facts and the law and keep their opinion out. It's very tough for humans to do that, but it is possible. You totally can do it. I'm more concerned about whether or not he's concerned about his legacy or whether or not he's going to be looked at in a negative light, and that's more important to him or not. I would call that the Fauci syndrome, where you're more concerned about what's left behind than actually making sure you're doing the right thing. I have no idea about this particular commissioner. I haven't seen that other than today's last question was concerning. We'll be keeping an eye on that. Yeah, they elevate everything. These guys should be making elevators. They should be making rockets. These guys are incredible at making a mountain out of a molehill. They're just really making it bad. For example, the one police officer or a lawyer for the police services was saying, okay, well, they would move a truck, but then somebody else would take up the spot. And that wasn't part of the deal. They're supposed to continue to go. And then they also made the statement that there was the, what was the term they used? The extreme supporters, the extreme protesters, where they kind of made a group where they were not part of the main group, which was cooperating, but they were more of the extreme group. Hey, look, there was an actual command. There wasn't an actual structure for this protest. These are all humans and Canadians that are protesting. And quite frankly, everybody's allowed to go ahead and protest the way they wanted to. The convoy group that kind of materialized, they did what they could to work with everybody that was willing to cooperate. But just like everybody else, even that group didn't have authority to force anybody to join their group like a union and then go along with things they didn't want. So for anybody to anticipate or expect that the convoy itself was responsible for every single person with a grievance against the federal government during those 3 weeks, that's ridiculous. And even the government itself couldn't have done that. They're not even responsible for their own departments and their own people and their own divisions. So that's ridiculous. But what you did see was a good, honest effort, good faith effort by the teams to do that. Go ahead and talk to truckers, trucker to trucker, convoy to convoy, protester to protester, to try and get them to understand that things can get worse. They're not responsible for anybody else making independent decisions, and for anybody to try and say that all that work that was done by the convoy organizers to cooperate with the city should be voided simply because someone else from outside of the group may have had a fringe connection just because they had an upside down flag. Therefore, the entire deal's off. That sounded like where they were going with that. Just because some people didn't follow with the agreement, which they're not a binding party, so they actually don't have to, doesn't make it a vitiated agreement. The government should have continued to see where that was going to go, especially when they were going to move to Van Cleek Hill. And if anybody knows the area, that's 40 minutes outside of the city. That's quite a ways outside of the city. So they were really taking it seriously that they were going to start setting up camps and protest, come inside, protest, and leave. That was going to be the longer term plan. Unfortunately, I think the federal government understood that that plan probably would work, so they had to quash it. I think that's probably what happened here when they realized that the convoy organizers were actually very good at that, and they were going to be able to continue long term with a peaceful protest, and they found a way to organize a peaceful protest that there was no way the federal government was going to let that happen. So they just ended it right there, pulled the plug, even at the surprise of the city of Ottawa, pulled the plug and went in there. I missed the last question. Yeah, so the commissioner was asking him how dangerous could it have been at the hotel had it been an actual emergency and situation was blocking some roads. In other words, the commissioner was painting a worst case scenario for a hotel incident that never happened, and was asking questions that kind of implied that he had concerns about how serious it could have been. I would like to remind the commissioner, if there's any way for him to hear this, your job is to stay with the events that happened, the actual events, not what could have happened, because what also could have happened is Prime Minister could have spoken to the convoy and everybody could have went home the first weekend. So we really shouldn't be trying to play this woulda, coulda, shoulda game, because quite frankly, the government loses that one right on its very, very face. So we can't play that shoulda, woulda, coulda game. It's also not fair. Wonder why this isn't a commission. Well, inquiries aren't, well, there's no judgment here. That's why, Vishal. There is no judgment here. This isn't a process to come to a decision and have a binding judgment. There's going to be a recommendation report. That's the extent of this. The commission itself is not going to have any powers to, put somebody in jail, find somebody. That's not what this is. This is an inquiry. Out of this inquiry can certainly come a lot of other procedures, including criminal and civil. So it's not like this inquiry clears everybody because it's just a report. This is just one step in the transparency and accountability stage, which is basically on a large scale. If you're looking at it like a court, the inquiry is just a big disclosure event. Everything's just going to be coming out. And then from disclosure, you can possibly move on to filing charges, lawsuits, perjury, defamation. There could be other things that come out of this. So don't get disheartened that there's going to be a report and not a judgment, because more can come from this. Now, if you really want a lot of accountability, it's going to have to come through the parliament and the government itself. So the 45th parliament, the 44th won't do anything about this. Thanks for the covering. No problem. Catch you tomorrow, Michelle. Some great comments. And I did take the advice from some people that were on the chat yesterday. I have made videos. So I did go through the first 3 days, pulled out the commentary, put it together, threw it up there. I don't know who's going to want to put themselves through that. I don't. But if you want to go ahead and watch my commentary again, separate from the inquiry, go ahead. Be my guest. Give me a like, a thumbs up, give me a subscribe. Everything does help. Oh, that's not cool. Are you referring to the that there's no judgment here? We'll get back to that one. Thanks so much, Jason. You're welcome. And hey, Light Fire Me, you had some great questions and you had some great stuff here, especially around the vaccine mandates and stuff. So if you ever want to come on the stream, please don't be shy. You can continue to use the name Light Fire Me, but I'd love to chat with you some more. You had some great insights. And I'm going to have an unscientific poll for you. So people are trying to say that we're split on this. That Canada, half of the people were for the protesters and not for the protest. I don't think those numbers are clear. Those numbers are not right at all. And just anecdotally. So I have some videos out and we got some likes and overwhelming support for the stuff that we're putting up there. I'm not getting hit with a bunch of dislikes and I'm not getting hit with a bunch of comments. Twitter, some, but not on YouTube, and they're not a lot. It doesn't appear that the entire city was upset and everybody wanted a solution, which is the kind of wording that they use so far in this inquiry. Everybody and all wanted. It's not true. It's just simply not true. Some people supported it. Some residents were fine with it, including the ones living right downtown, right on the street. Thanks, Matthews. No problem. Yes, we'll see you tomorrow. Hopefully you can make it. And let me just go look at who the witnesses should be tomorrow. We may hear from Councillor Diane Deans, because she was next on the list, and possibly Patricia Ferguson from the Ottawa Police Services. So if we are going to continue with this, we may be wrapping up with the City of Ottawa tomorrow, and then we're going to be on to the police services. And going by the questions from the representative from the police services, they're not impressed with being thrown under the bus by the councillors or the city. So I expect it to be a lot of information around how they were able to do everything they could with what they had, and that some places in the command structure, maybe the mayor's office or other places, were becoming a hindrance to them succeeding. And we may also hear if they were surprised by the request to stop the trucks from moving. So we heard a lot of testimony that the police stopped the trucks from moving to Wellington and moving even from where they were. We may get a lot more information on who gave that command and why. It would make no sense, even if the Emergency Act is being contemplated and brought in. Why would you stop the progress of people leaving? Is it just for the optics? I'm not sure. No problem. No problem. And take care, James, and we'll see you tomorrow. Oh, another one from you. Yes. Yeah, the algorithm, it does help, actually. We had one video go viral. I've never seen that before, but yeah, hundreds of views an hour for one of my videos is not normal. So yeah, hit like, make some comments, subscribe, pass to your friend, do that little bell thing. But I'm going to take off a little bit early. I think we got through a lot of the stuff we were looking for today. We knew the city was going to start pointing fingers everywhere but itself. I was very disappointed with Jim's testimony, though. It's clear that he's one of those not good politicians, the ones that use political positions to have some power and do their things. But being able to tell two different sides of the story and contradict itself and not have a problem with it was interesting. And the biggest one for that is our city was in crumbles and was about to fail. At the same time, we were a great example to the rest of the world on how to deal with a big protest. So pick a lane, Jim. You can't be in both of those. See you tomorrow, Kelly. Thank you, everybody. And at that, we'll sign off. Have yourself a great night. 9 a.m. Eastern time, I'll be here. 9:30 is when the coverage will start again at the inquiry. And until then, have yourself a great night. Thank you very much and take care. Bye, everyone.
And if you liked this video, remember to like and subscribe and press that notification button to receive more information like this. You can also follow me at yellowhead.vote to stay informed and get the inside scoop. Thank you.